Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to be making a video about Frost getting a rework. My rework idea specifically, and the reason why I bring this up is because some elemental changes are getting added to the game sometime soon. I don't know when, but basically soon enough that they decided to disclose it on a dev stream. Um, and one of those changes was cold. Cold is essentially getting some more crit damage bonuses, which is fine and all. And I heard a lot of people say that, oh, Frost is going to get a massive buff from this. Frost is not getting a buff from this because you're essentially already just making it so he has his passive augment for crit damage and crit chance. You're just giving it more so into all characters. So it's not even really a buff to Frost, it's a buff to cold, which Frost is not cold. So, yeah, without further ado, let's get in my Frost rework so we can actually get a buff for Frost because he deserves it. So we're in the simulacrum. I'm looking at my mod so you guys can see the build that I'll be using when I'm talking about this video, so you guys can have an understanding about where we're getting our numbers from. And without further ado, let's talk about it. So Archon Flow for the energy, obviously, but also because if Frost abilities work just as they should, we would want this as an auto end slot for him because it's just built mainly for him. You could hypothetically run this on Gauss if you really wanted to, but it's whatever. Um, Prime continuity for the durations. Rolling guard because we're playing Steel Path. Blind Rage because we need the strength. Energy Nexus because the problem with Frost is that he has massive drains on a lot of his abilities, uh, and he does not have enough energy to even consider spamming the amount that he actually has to does in game. So yeah, we need some place to get energy. If you have Archon Energize or Arcane Energize, this would be something you could replace with, obviously. But until we get that, and if you don't have that, then you kind of need something. Stretch for the range, which is also the same reason we're using Cutting Drift, just so we get that 160% on range. And Icy Avalanche, because every build makes this. It's an auto end slot on pretty much all builds for Frost. You cannot have a Frost without this augment. A Biting Frost. This augment is kind of bad just because we're armor stripping enemies constantly. So red crit or not, they're gonna die. So the 200% crit chance at damage is fine. I mean, it's kind of funny you see the big red numbers, but it doesn't really help you in gameplay. You could get rid of this for something completely different. But yeah, well, that's pretty much the build. We have Physique because I just needed an aura mod. Anything can go here if you want for your build. If you want rifle damage, go ahead, throw it in there. I don't care. Um, yeah, that's pretty much it. So we're gonna go over his abilities now, starting with his passive. So his passive, essentially, enemies who strike him with melee attacks. Damn, I already fucked this up. Three, two, one. So we're gonna go over his abilities, starting with his passive. Frost passive is essentially when enemies strike him with a melee attack, they have a 10% chance to get frozen for 20 seconds. This is a stupid passive, and we will be getting rid of this in the rework. Freeze, essentially you throw a snowball and it can freeze a guy. It has no radius on it at all, so we don't know what the range is. If I had to guess, it's probably like 2, maybe 3 meters at most, and it only freezes the person you direct cast it on. No one surrounding him. It's really bad. Ice Wave, basically you punch the ground and a bunch of icy spikes come out of the ground. They kind of like crystals, and it does damage. However, this damage is negligible at best in Steel Path, like you won't even notice it, which is funny considering the fact it says dealing heavy damage. It does not. Snow Globe, Frost will cast a bubble around him, so all damage that's coming at the bubble will absorb it instead of yourself or your allies, essentially basically giving you a wall between you and your enemies. Avalanche, you cast it, it's a giant AoE, has no line of sight, and will freeze enemies and it can armor strip them. So now we're going to get into the augments. Starting with his passive augment, Biting Frost. Frost gains 200% crit chance and damage to frozen enemies. His first augment for freeze. Freeze, hold to cast, will apply cold damage to your weapons, such as your primary, secondaries, and melees. Ice Waves, augment Ice Wave impedance, will essentially just allow you to slow enemies who are caught in the Ice Wave for an extended duration. Chilling Globe will allow it so that way enemies have a 50% chance to be frozen for 8 seconds, which will scale on duration. If they step into the Snow Globe, Icy Avalanche. Enemies who are affected by Avalanche will give Frost and his allies Overguard. So I'm going to go ahead and just give you guys a quick demonstration of some of his abilities. So the first one is Freeze. As you see, it can freeze. It does like some cold to the nearby enemies, but it doesn't freeze them. You can kind of see like on their legs, they're a little bit frozen, but it just freezes the main guy that you throw it at, which is why it's not so great. And it only freezes him. Doesn't matter how many times you cast it, it doesn't matter. Like, yeah, they're taking freeze stacks, but they're not frozen. Which is part of the reason why this is a bad ability, because you can't freeze groups of enemies. Moving on to a second ability, Ice Wave. And that's essentially what it does. It does no damage, and it has like this cone that it goes out into. It's a cool looking ability, but does no damage, which is why nobody likes it. His third ability, Snow Globe. Essentially, you make a bubble around you. Enemies who are trapped inside of it when first cast will get shot out, and they'll be frozen. And yeah, you shoot at it, and as he is in the wall, it has health. And that's pretty much essentially how the ability works. Again, if enemies are inside it when you cast it, they'll get shot out, which can potentially do some decent damage like that, but it's not really a main form to kill people with. Now, as for his 4, oh, and I probably should also mention before I get into the 4, is you can throw your freeze to break the snow globe if you want to. Anyways, but for as 4 goes, you just press it and they're all about to lose their armor. And that's essentially how the ability works, and they're going to die relatively quickly because they just don't have armor to protect them. So now we're going to get into the actual rework portion of the video, and we're going to be copying some other Warframe ideas. Some of their abilities are going to come in here, starting with the passive is going to be basically kind of a copy of Hydroid's passive, but the cold variant. So essentially, I just want all of Frost's cold damage, like whether it comes from his melees, his abilities, his guns, or even like his parkour, like sliding and bullet jumping into enemies. They all grant a special like cold stack and an icon that come with it, kind of like how Hydroids does, just as an example. So we're playing Hydroid now, and as you will see, all damage can apply like this corrosive stack, which is unique to him, and you can see like this icon above it. And essentially that's how I want him, or I want Frost to work, is that you'll see like this icon, and meaning this enemy will have the can have the full freeze status applied to them, which this is only applied to Hydroid right now, but I would like to see like the cold version of this on Frost, and essentially making it so that way all the damage you deal, whether it's through your melees or through your weapons, can essentially just apply a full freeze or a deep freeze mechanic, showing off Hydroid's passive, just so for those you guys to understand. Enemies damaged by Hydroid are more vulnerable to corrosion status, with initial status reducing armor by 50%. Again, basically making it so we get a cold version of this. Now, the freeze changes are going to be, first off, we're giving this thing a radius. The fact we can't see how wide the area is kind of dumb. And I want the radius to be in line with Snow Globe's radius. So 5 meters at base with my build, 8 meters, that's not bad. We can deal with that. So basically we get an 8 meter freeze just to completely freeze enemies would be great. And we're also going to reduce his drain for freeze down to 10. With my build, with Blind Rage on, will be like 15.5, so 15.5. That's completely usable. Doesn't matter, you know, you can just spam this out all day, and we want to spam it because this is going to be our main form of freezing enemies, not Avalanche. The actual augment for this ability is going to get changed so the way basically it allows your teammates to get Frost passive while that duration is active. And I also want the actual freeze duration of this ability, not just for the augment, but for Frost as well, to go down to 10 seconds. And with our duration, we'll go up to 15.5, so 15.5 seconds. That's plenty of time to deal with frozen enemies. If you cannot kill a frozen enemy, a completely CC'd enemy in 15.5 seconds, you are objectively ass. So the changes I want to make to Ice Wave are going to be that first off, we're going to address the drain. We're going to bring that down to 25 so we can spam this because this is going to be his main damage ability and we don't want that to be on like super high costs. So we're going to bring that down to 25 and that'll put it at around like a 38 drain on with Blind Rage active. So there's that. And the range and angle, all that can stay the same. I don't really care about that stuff. The damage, however, is going to be changed to not just raw damage. It's still going to be cold damage, but it's going to be a percentage of damage. And the reason we want it to stay cold damage so it can proc Archon Flow, so that way we can get our energy back, thus making the whole spammy thing useful. Um, but yeah, we're going to make a percentage damage like Revenant's Reeve. Reeve is going to do 80% damage as just right now with our Blind Rage. And we're going to want a similar effect. We're going to want that 80% on Frost. And I want 80% because that way you can add more strength depending on what your build is and whatnot. And also you can add more Archon shards and stuff like that. Um, so we want the 80%, but that's only if they are frozen. If they're not frozen, it won't do that damage. It'll do half the damage, so it'll do 40% instead of 80%. So 40% if they're not frozen, 80% if they are frozen. So 100% increase on the damage if they're frozen. So we'll be going from doing this to doing this. Now, as for the augment, we're going to make it so the way the augment enemies affected by Ice Wave and or killed by Ice Wave have increased chances to drop health, energy, and ammo, thus allowing Frost to become more of an endurance frame as well being like, the defense frame. The reason you want endurance is because the idea is if he's going to defend an objective, he's going to be there for a good while. So you're going to need him to be topped up. And this augment will essentially allow him to keep that up. And because of how the energy is going to work between these two abilities, it'll double dip with Archon Flow. So if you have energy issues, you can consider running this with Archon Flow. So now you're getting multiple energy orbs being dropped instead of just the couple, basically making him more self-sufficient, which is something that I think everyone would want from the frames. Um, yeah, it's essentially all I want. The augment isn't going to be more than that. Like I said, um, enemies affected by Ice Wave and or killed by Ice Wave. The reason we want affected is that maybe you don't want to keep just spamming it, or maybe you cast it once and then you just finish them off with your gun and stuff like that. That's why I say affected, not killed. I mean, it works both ways, but you get the idea. Now we're going to get on to the changes to Snow Globe. So, first thing with Snow Globe, the drain I think is fine for this ability. I don't think it needs to be more or any less. The range on it is fine. The health is going to be mostly removed, and because I'll explain that in a second. The slow we can get rid of that and just make it so the way all enemies who step inside of it are going to get frozen. And when they get frozen, the snow globe is going to auto react to just shoot them out, like how when you first cast it, it shoots them out. I want that same mechanic just built into the snow globe, even after it's been placed. Um, so any enemy who walks into it, which is mostly going to be melee enemies who are just trying to get close to you, are just going to walk into it, and then the snow globe is going to reject them and shoot them out. Um, so I want that. I also want an icon showing you everything, all the information that we're going to get on Snow Globe, and I'll go over all the information now. So the first thing we're going to get is see how it says time invulnerable. That's very important to Snow Globe because that's basically your guaranteed window of immunity for all damage. I want this to be increased to 10 seconds, and it can scale with duration. The reason we want this is so with my build, say like we have it at 10 seconds, which is a good amount of time, and then we add with my duration from prime continuity, that'd be 15 and a half seconds. So we have 15 and a half seconds to be immune. Then all that damage and immunity that we take is going to be given to as health. That's where the health comes from. So say if I take 100,000 damage in 15 seconds, I effectively have about another 15 seconds of snow globe. Now, the reason why it's not going to actually work out that way in game, it's just kind of like a rough estimate, essentially. And then on top of that, we're going to get a strength multiplier. The strength multiplier comes from our strength. Obviously, since we're running Blind Rage, it's going to be 199%, so basically 200%. The strength multiplier at 100%, what it's going to be is just a flat one times bonus. So at 200%, in the case of Blind Rage, will be a 2 times bonus. So that 100,000 damage we take goes up to 200,000 damage. So essentially, we get 45 seconds of Snow Globe active. And that's essentially how I want Snow Globe to work on from this point out. Now, as for the augment, What I essentially want from the augment is how the Arctic Eximus enemies have it, where they can walk around with it. So we're gonna make the augment a hold, so we have tap for the actual snow globe, and then we have hold for being able to carry it around. And just to display what I'm talking about, I mean these guys with how they can walk around their snow globes. This is what I want from Frost's augment. So this way we have people who can, bring the snow globe and bring it with them, thus adding another kind of like layer of defense. That way he's not just being forcibly stuck to just one objective. And that's essentially what I want. So we want these snow globes to be a part of Frost kit. Finally, we're at Avalanche. Avalanche is a perfect ability. The only things I would really change on Avalanche is the armor reduction values. I'd say drop that down to 40%, so you have to invest some more strength into it to get that 100% strip, which isn't very hard to do with Archon shards. So, yeah, I mean, with my blind rage on right now, I'm at 120%, so it's not like it could reduce. It could use some reductions if we're being honest. Um, Overall, I think it's a fine ability. Um, I just kind of want to keep it somewhat in line with the changes to Ice Wave that I'll be making, or that I want made. So way, not just have like one that's objectively better than the other. You kind of want to use both, but not just like all the armor strips to just shoot them. Um, yeah, that's essentially it. That's the rework, guys. Hope you guys enjoy.